You have heard it 1,000 times. People like to pretend it is just bad behavior, just attention seeking, just someone who drinks too much. But when you listen closely, when you stop judging for 1 second, that noise is not random. It is a system failing to communicate and a human being paying the price. Today I want you to step down from the moral pedestal you built for yourself. I want you to stop looking at Pheo like he is a monster you can safely label. Lean in, get close enough to smell the tragedy, and ask yourself the question you avoid because it makes you uncomfortable. What would you become if society took away your right to be heard and then blamed you for screaming? Welcome to the hidden self. This episode is a psychological autopsy of isolation, labeling, and the slow manufacture of a human turned into an animal. It is about how a person loses their name, loses their face in other people's eyes, and finally loses the last permission they need to stay human. And then, it is about what you are doing right now when you participate in that same machine. You think the story is old, you think it lives in literature, in a village, in the past. But you are wrong. In 2026, the tools have changed, the uniforms have changed, the platform has changed. The cruelty is still the same, the mechanism is still the same. One part of society does the harm, the other part watches silently, and the victim is forced to prove they deserve compassion, after everyone already decided they do not. Let's begin with the sound you hate to hear. There is a man walking and swearing. In your mind, he is a drunken brute. In your mind, he is a danger. In your mind, he is chaos. And if you are honest, you use those thoughts to protect yourself from a darker possibility. The darker possibility is that his swearing is not the cause, it is the symptom. It is the final tool he has left to make contact with other human beings. A child abandoned in the dark does not begin with elegance. It begins with noise. It cries because silence does not work. It screams because no one responds to polite requests when you have been cast out. The same logic applies to adults. When the world refuses you, your nervous system starts pulling the emergency brake. You try louder. You try more aggressively. You try everything that can possibly break through the wall. Pheo's swearing is desperate contact. It is his body trying to say, I am still here, look at me. Acknowledge that I exist. Respond to me. Punish me if you must, but do not pretend I am invisible. And the village responds the way villages always respond when they prefer comfort over truth. It punishes the sound instead of addressing the wound. It treats the scream as evidence of evil, not evidence of injury. And here is the part that will make you feel defensive, so you will want to rush past it. The most terrifying sound is not the scream, it is the silence around it. The invisible wall of indifference, the refusal to see, the refusal to talk, the refusal to treat him as a person with an inner life. In modern terms, we could call it social extinction. When people stop assigning meaning to you, when they stop including you in their moral community, you begin to lose reality. You do not just become lonely, you become unmoored. You become a problem people manage instead of a human people relate to. Chi is not created in a moment, he is created in stages, and each stage strips away a layer of his humanity while pretending it is justice. First, he is abandoned, no parents, no home, not even a piece of land where fate can land softly. He is born out of a discarded place, a brick kiln left behind like the village forgot it existed. That image is not decoration. It is a psychological origin story. A brick kiln is where something is formed by heat and pressure, but it is also where the fragile parts get burned. If you were shaped there, you were not shaped into safety. You were shaped into survival. Then, at some point, the story tells you he has an earlier self. He is a farm guard, strong, honest, grounded, and the key detail is this: he has self-respect. It is not just that he is good, it is that he feels shame when someone humiliates him. When the wealthy woman or the wealthy family wants to use him, he does not enjoy being degraded. He experiences it as injury. That is a sign of a clean inner boundary. A lot of people misunderstand this. They think moral purity means you never get hurt. No, moral purity means you still recognize what happened to you and you still care. You still feel the line between respect and violation. So ask the next question. Who kills the honest farm guard? It is not one punch. It is a system. It is the entrance gate to the colonial prison. But more broadly, it is any institution that treats certain bodies as raw material. The prison is where ideology gets installed into the skull, not through speeches, but through routine, through humiliation, through stripping identity, through training the person to expect pain and then to become pain. Picture a factory for personality. They take out gentleness and replace it with aggression. They take out self-respect and replace it with recklessness. They take out hope and replace it with revenge. And when he walks out, he does not walk out as a man. He walks out as a configuration, a shaved head, white teeth, dark, hard eyes. He looks like an animal built to tear. This is what happens when the world says you are not a person. Your body believes the verdict. Your behavior follows the script. And then people say, see, he always was a monster. That cycle is the true tragedy. The world creates the conditions for dehumanization, then acts shocked when dehumanization becomes visible. Now let's pull the camera in further. Because the story is not only about prison, it is about power. Pheo becomes the perfect product for someone else's agenda. Someone needs him. Someone manages him. Someone uses him as a tool. That someone is Qian. You might think he is evil because he is violent, but his violence is not the real weapon. His real weapon is management, human resources, psychological governance. He does not destroy Qi directly. He nourishes the part of Qi that will harm others. He keeps the machine running. Notice the method. When Qi is newly released, he comes with anger. He is a man who feels he has nothing left to lose. People who have nothing left to lose are dangerous. They do not fear consequences the way normal people do. They will burn the village down. So Qian does not fight him straight on. He smiles. He invites him inside. He feeds him. He gives him alcohol. He calls him brother. He invents kinship. He offers small benefits. And in doing that, he wraps the monster in loyalty. This is the rule of power nobody teaches you explicitly. Bend soft things, break hard things. When someone becomes hard, you do not always hit them. Sometimes you seduce them with belonging. You give them a reason to stay attached. Qian understands the psychology of dependency. He knows that the most dangerous people are not always the ones who are furious. They are the ones who crave significance. They are the ones who need to believe they matter somewhere. So Qi becomes a dog in the most brutal sense of the word. Not because he is naturally stupid, because he is strategically starved of safe human connection, and then offered a substitute connection that comes with orders. He is converted from an injured person into a hired instrument. And you can see the contemporary version of this everywhere. It is not always a landlord. It is sometimes a boss. It is sometimes a recruiter. It is sometimes an influencer economy. It is sometimes a gang. The structure is the same. Give the person just enough status and resources to control their behavior, then punish them when they stop being useful. Qi thinks he is the agent. He thinks he is the one choosing, but he is being pulled by invisible strings. When he is no longer valuable, he is discarded. That is how exploitation works. It does not only use bodies, it uses identities. There is a phrase in the story that hits like a hammer. The idea that governing requires a thick-headed bull, a tool that can withstand and take action. In other words, you do not need your scapegoat to be wise. You need your scapegoat to be disposable. Now let's talk about the part that you will call romance, because that is what people do when they want to avoid the deeper truth. Qi meets Tina. In many retellings, it becomes a love story. But here it is not love like a perfume commercial. It is collision. Two social cast-offs touching the same river of life. One is a violent, stigmatized man. The other is a woman society already pushed into the corner, viewed as defective. The meeting happens under moonlight. Biology calls them closer. Yes, there is desire. No, do not act shocked. Human beings are human beings. But the psychological point is not the sexuality. The psychological point is existence. When you have been rejected long enough, touch becomes proof. Not just proof of pleasure, proof of reality. Proof that your body is still connected to the world. For people society labels as less, intimacy can be the only language that still works. And then something miracle-like happens. The next morning, Qi wakes up. Listen to how the story treats waking. It is not just waking up physically, it is sensory restoration. Birds, sunlight, sounds of daily life, a boat hitting the oars, people returning from the market. These details are not poetic fluff. They are the brain remembering what life means. When someone has been trapped in alcohol, in numbness, in rage, the inner world goes silent. They stop feeling time. They stop feeling nuance. They stop distinguishing tomorrow from yesterday. Silence becomes their habitat. But after intimacy and after a small act of care, The senses return, and the mind returns with them. And what does Chi feel first? Not victory, not happiness. He feels something more human. He feels sadness. Hold on to that word. Sadness is a good sign. A beast does not know sadness about time passing. A beast only knows hunger and fullness. Sadness is what happens when you start comparing your current life to an inner standard of meaning. Sadness means you are capable of regret. Sadness means you still want things that go beyond survival. That is why sadness is the first symptom of humanity returning. Your pain becomes specific. Your longing becomes traceable. You realize you want a home. You remember an earlier version of yourself. You begin to imagine peace. And then comes the bat chow hein, the bowl of green onion porridge. In many adaptations, this is reduced to an act of kindness and nothing more. But the story is saying something sharp. It is saying that the cost of salvation is cheap, and the tragedy is that society is too stingy to offer it. Why porridge? Why not something luxurious? Medical logic says it soothes a cold. Philosophical logic says it exposes the cruelty of value systems. Onion porridge is modest. Grain is basic. The material value is near nothing. So what is it actually worth? It is worth attention. It is worth presence. It is worth the permission to be cared for without being purchased. Imagine what it means psychologically to receive attention when your life has been defined by contempt. Imagine eating something that tells your nervous system, you are not just a threat. You are still worthy of gentleness. Chi begins sweating. He imagines detox. His body processes the shame and the anger as if he could sweat out years of humiliation. He wants to cry because he recognizes himself as a child. He recognizes himself as someone who can be loved. This is the psychological mechanism that matters. When people receive non-transactional care, the brain starts reorganizing. It starts letting down defenses. It starts letting in hope. Hope is not just positive thinking. It is a neurochemical shift that enables planning, memory, and relational trust. And then the tragedy weaponizes that same hope. Because the bowl is not just food, it is a passport. It is an invitation back into humanity. But hope is fragile. Hope grows best in safe environments. And Chi's environment is not safe. His environment is a village built on labeling. Who closes the door? Not Bakian alone. Not only the wealthy. Not only the prison. The story points to something more subtle and more lethal. Social prejudice as a force. Enter the Bako T-Ner's aunt. She does not stab him. She does not shoot him. She only speaks, and her speech is enough. Her words represent the official culture of disgust. She ridicules T-Ner for associating with a man marked by a past. She insults his lineage, his face, his criminal record. She calls him inhuman through gossip. She turns identity into a permanent curse. This is how prejudice functions. It does not merely dislike behavior. It rewrites the person as an object, puts a label on the forehead, and then treats everything they do as confirmation of the label. A label is a shortcut. It saves other people effort. It saves them the work of real empathy. But it costs the person their future. When Tina hesitates under pressure, when she withdraws, Chi's emotional world collapses instantly. The bowl becomes poison. And here is the most psychologically accurate detail. It is not that he stops loving. It is that his mind cannot survive the contradiction. The contradiction is unbearable. I received care, so I could believe in humanity again. Then I was rejected again, so I must now believe I was never human enough. That contradiction turns grief into rage. He reaches for alcohol again, but this time alcohol fails to numb him. His senses are awake. His mind is conscious. So the shame floods back harder than before. And then comes the collapse into self-destruction. This is what the story calls the tragedy of waking up. Chi wakes up and realizes two things at the same time. One, he craves goodness. Two, society has blocked every road to goodness. You cannot be good if the door is welded shut. You cannot redeem yourself if everyone uses your past to prevent your present. So what happens when someone is denied both comfort and possibility? They make one final choice. They try to preserve their last humanity by dying. Not because death is peaceful, because life has become psychologically intolerable. Because if he lives, he will be consumed by the same machine again. He will be forced back into a role. He will be turned into a weapon permanently. In that moment, his suicide is not only revenge, it is a statement. It is a final sentence to the universe. You do not get to keep using me while refusing to recognize me. You might still want a loophole, a rationalization. You might want to say, but he could escape. He could run away. He could start over somewhere else. The story's answer is brutal. Once you understand the truth of your social cage, you cannot ununderstand it. His mind becomes evidence against continued suffering. He understands he is trapped by a system that can always grab him, always imprison him, always relabel him, always convert him into a tool. The more conscious he becomes, the less bearable the lie becomes. So he does the only thing left that feels like agency. He kills the person he believes is responsible for the closing of the door, and then he dies. Blood becomes the final purge, the only ritual he can afford to cleanse his identity. Now, I want you to zoom out and connect this to your world, not to literature, to life. You have a society too, and it manufactures Pheo in new forms. 1. Labeling in workplaces and schools. You know the type. The teacher who tags a child as disruptive, the manager who tags an employee as incompetent, the colleague who tags someone as always negative, the group that writes someone off as unfixable. At first, it looks like just observations, but labels are not neutral. Labels are behavior forecasts. Once people believe a label, they stop seeing evidence that contradicts it. They stop asking why. They stop offering second chances. They start treating the person like a problem they must manage, not a human they must understand. Over time, the label becomes a cage. The person internalizes it. Their self-concept bends to match the external story. They begin behaving like what they were told they are, because identity becomes the only way to reduce the pain of contradiction. This is the hidden cruelty of institutions. They treat people like data. And data cannot feel shame, cannot feel hope, cannot feel the humiliation of being excluded. Then the person finally snaps and everyone says, I knew it. I told you he was like that. But you did not witness their transformation. You only witnessed the outcome of the transformation you helped create. 2. The cost of redemption and clean records as a weapon. People love to pretend society forgives. People love slogans about second chances, but look at what actually happens when someone tries to return after failing. A criminal background is not just information, it is a permanent badge in many minds. Companies reject, neighbors gossip, friends become distant. Online, it becomes a rumor machine that never sleeps, and then the system acts surprised when the person collapses into despair or reoffense. But why would they assume society will forgive if society never stops proving it will not? It is the prison logic again, just wearing different clothes. Replace prison bars with rejection emails. Replace guards with HR filters. Replace abuse with social refusal. And when you refuse someone the tools to live decently, you are not preventing crime. You are creating conditions that make crime more likely. 3. The darkness inside each of us. Be honest. Every time life crushes you and you feel powerless, you feel temptation. The temptation to rage, the temptation to curse, the temptation to break things, the temptation to become someone you do not respect, because at least that version of you does not feel weak. That part in you is not evil. It is injured. It is the part that learned that being loud is the only way to be noticed. It is the part that learned that being aggressive gets some response. It is the part that learned to treat the world as a threat. You tell yourself you would never become like Chi. You tell yourself you have education, family, laws, structure. Maybe you do. But the boundary between person and beast is fragile. It depends on what your nervous system thinks is possible. It depends on whether the world offers care before it offers punishment. It depends on whether you still believe you have roots back to dignity. Chi had no roots. When he finally found a root, it was destroyed by prejudice. That is what makes his tragedy not only personal but structural. So what do you do if you recognize pieces of this mechanism in your own behavior, or in the way you treat others? You stop participating in cruelty disguised as standards. You stop acting like contempt is wisdom. You stop assuming that labels are truth. Most people will not do that because it is easier to judge than to investigate. It is easier to be safe inside your moral certainty than to risk seeing the complexity of another human being. Empathy requires work, and work feels like vulnerability. But if you want to rise and stand up, then do not stand up as a bully. Stand up as someone willing to see beyond the label. So here is the call to action, and I will make it blunt. Stop withholding the small, cheap kindness that changes a brain's chemistry. Stop acting like you are too busy to give attention to someone who is inconvenient. Stop treating a person's past as a life sentence. Offer the equivalent of an onion porridge in your real world, a moment of care that is not transactional, a small inclusion, a sincere conversation, an opportunity given before the punishment. Because you do not know whose prison gate you are standing near. You might think this episode is only about Pheo, but it is about the production line of dehumanization. It is about how power recruits monsters. It is about how silence enables cruelty. It is about how prejudice kills hope. And it is also about what happens when someone finally wakes up and realizes redemption is blocked. When that awareness arrives, their last remaining human act may be self-destruction, not because they love death, but because they cannot tolerate living as a lie. Now let the story end in the way it ends in literature. It does not offer comfort. It offers a question hanging over the village like smoke. There is an image of an old brick kiln returning in vision. Pheos looks down and sees the possibility of the old tragedy continuing.